How's it going, everyone? Today we are going to discuss Bridgerton Season 1 on Netflix. Alright, let's start off with the pros. I guess I should mention before we start and get too deep into this that clearly I am not their target audience. So you can take everything I say with a grain of salt. And on top of that, I'm judging it purely from a writing standpoint. I'm not judging the acting. I guess will come out a little bit with that, but I'm not judging cinematography or anything like that. I'm just judging purely characters, plot, you know, dialogue. I'm not gonna go into specific camera angles, stuff like that. On top of that, I there are shows similar to this that I think have good writing and that I've enjoyed. That doesn't mean that this is necessarily my cup of tea. And on top of that, this is very reminiscent of Jane Austen, and I don't like her writing. So you can guess how this is going to go. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to try to do a non-spoiler and talk about my recommendation, and then I'm going to go into spoilers and then a few other things. So, some positive thing about the show is I think that there are a lot of characters who are interesting. Um, there's a lot of characters in this show, but like Eloise, Penelope, Simon, Lady Danbury, even Antony, they kind of stand out. I feel like they stand up a little bit more. Their conflicts are a little bit more interesting. They have a bit more personality to them, which I thought was really cool. It's also kind of nice that these episodes are long. I mean, you get a lot of content in 8 episodes, which is nice because they're all about an hour ish. So, um, that's basically where my positives end for this show. I know there's been a lot of hype around this show, and that doesn't surprise me because there's this story structure I find very, like, it seems very common in a lot of the romance genre that I have read or that I have experienced. Yes, I have read romance novels. Guess what? You need to experience a lot of stuff if you want to write. So let's go on to some critiques, just general critiques about the show. And most of it has to do with there being too many characters. There are some good characters out of that, but I go back to a time when I think of playwriting in undergrad, and you know, we had to be very conscious of how many people we were putting on stage. And I know playwriting and screenwriting aren't the exact same thing, but they do share things. When you have, I know there's going to be more seasons, but we're counting this as, this should be one story, and I know this is based off a book, but I'm not going into that. I'm not going on to the source material. I'm talking about specifically about the TV show. When you have this many plot lines, you don't have enough time to resolve them. There's too many things, too many characters going on. And, like, you can have a lot of characters, like side characters, things like that. Daphne's family, all her siblings, for the first season could have just been, a character together. They could have been one unit that kind of was around. Yeah, they could have had different names and we could have been introduced to them a little slowly. Maybe Antony or one of the other siblings, Eloise, I think is probably the best character out of all of them, including Daphne. If they had acted as a unit and then we slowly got them pulled apart over the course of multiple seasons, I think that would have been a lot better. But trying to understand, like, 6 characters from one family all with their own plots going on at the same time is too much. You're focusing on too many things, and everyone's story suffers from that. And a big thing is you just don't have enough time. And this show, it's very clear to me in this show that this is like one of the major flaws of it. You don't have enough time to do setups and payoffs and build tension. Most of what I found is that it's from plot point to plot point to plot point. And we don't get those moments that actually drag on and make us as an audience feel, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? You know, what's going on with this? What you know, we want to see this happen, but we want to have that conflict build up and build tension. But for the most part, the conflict is almost instantly resolved with no real effort on any of the characters' behalfs. And this is particularly bad with Daphne, who is the protagonist. And this is one thing that I've seen a lot. I actually think like there are like Lady Danbury and Eloise and Penelope are great female characters. They're very awesome. Daphne is not. Daphne is a boring, bland character. She has no personality. And she's got this in her dialogue. There's this written in a way that, and there were some good points of this, but it's written in this feminist voice, which Eloise takes way more authority in. But she's trying to fit this traditional archetype role of the perfect daughter and housewife, basically. And so it just, there's not like, her character doesn't have, it's like it's trying to do too many things in one character. On top of that, part of the problem is with these protagonists like this is the perfectionist. She's perfect in every way imaginable. And that is problematic because an interesting character has flaws. They have things that they want, they can't get, or things that directly are problems to them growing and becoming more interest, or like getting to the goals that they want to get to in the long run. Eloise's main, like, wouldn't say this is necessarily a flaw, but like her main thing is like she doesn't want to be a part of traditional society, right? So her character is interesting because we get to see this conflict and tension build up where she doesn't want to conform to the mold that her sister is in, but she kind of, like, in this time era, she semi has to in certain ways. So back to Daphne though, and the perfectionist thing. I'm going to point it out more in the spoiler discussion part of this video, but the biggest thing is, like, everyone loves her and no one dislikes her for pretty much any reason. And even when a person does dislike her, it's very brief. Or if she makes a mistake, it's instantly solved. And that's problematic because we need to see her build conflict. And the show basically, the way it's written, tells us that, like, it could be interesting where she sees herself as completely perfect, but the people around her see her as arrogant and full of herself. That would be interesting. But that's not how it's written. The story is basically written where she can do no wrong. She's this bland character who all the boys fall for no apparent reason. So, yeah. We'll get into a bit more of that. I kind of already touched on this a little bit, but the whole lack of conflict is probably one of the other, like, it's a really big issue. The conflict that does come up, like, you can see the setup. There's like this piece that starts, that should lead into this, like, struggle for potentially a couple episodes, and then it's cut. It's just immediately reversed. This character is immediately out of the situation. There's no consequences for those situations. There's nothing that, I guess that's the biggest way to say it. There's no consequences at all for anyone. And it actually, except for one character. there's one character who actually has semi consequences. Some of how they got there, I'm a little bit like, but besides that, it's all just immediately problems resolved, basically. Um, I mean, I'm just one guy on the internet, right? You guys can all disagree with me or agree with me, and we can talk about it, politely. And honestly, no matter what I say, Bridgerton's getting like 8 more seasons because people eat this stuff up. Uh, so I don't see this show going anywhere. I don't see this style of writing going anywhere in the near future. While I, it's not good. It's really not. There's nothing. There's no way ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not good writing. There are a lot of problems with that, but it doesn't matter because people watch it and people enjoy watching it. So, but honestly, I think there. I've watched shows like the two shows that came to mind initially were Outlander and Harlots, which are, I would say Harlots is a bit more out of the genre. Outlander's a bit closer to what I think Bridgerton is. I mean, it's different in a certain way. But honestly, both those shows are definitely not targeted towards men. But they're really good. They're really well written. There's some issues in both of them. I think I have to go back and watch it, and I'll review them at some point. But I think they're better options for this genre. Now, as for do I recommend this or not, clearly I have a lot of critical problems with this. But like, if you like this show, then just watch it. It's fine. You don't need to listen to me or anyone else. If you enjoy it, just enjoy it and have a good time with it. I would probably say exhaust some of your other options first, but if you're like out of stuff to watch, just this is gonna be popular and people are gonna like it. So be part of the curve, I guess. Okay. So I'm gonna start talking about spoiler stuff, and it's gonna mostly be critical, as most of this video has been. So if you don't want spoilers, leave now. Goodbye. You got 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoiler time. Okay. So Daphne. The examples I wanted to bring up were, first off, were the pig situation when she and Simon are married and they go to Cliveden, and she is basically like, everyone ties because I don't want to have a pig slaughtered, which is something I could definitely see her doing. The problem isn't that she chooses that. The problem is that there are zero consequences for that choice. It's brought up that, hey, because you did this, these farmers are kind of mad because they're not going to get any money. Like, the winner always gets a contract, basically. So no one gets the contract. And she realizes she made a mistake. That would be interesting to follow. She becomes a duchess and messes up, and then we get to see the consequences of that fallout and her trying to fix the situation. But all we get to see is her basically say, oh, I guess I should fix this, and then it's fixed. There's no tension, there's no conflict built up, it's just gone. That's problematic. The other scene that comes to mind, there's a few other things, 2 things. First thing is when she goes to gamble with all the women when they go back to London, and she's never played before, but she wins all the time, and all the ladies still love her for it. It's okay. No. I mean, let's be honest. If she went there because she wanted to talk to the general's wife, to get the letter sent out for George. There's, again, a lot of characters. I actually watched some of it twice, and I still don't know all the characters, like, name by memory. But if she there's a scene there where she's talking to the general's wife, and the general's wife's like, "Oh no, you can call me by my first name because you've taken enough of my money and stuff like that." And it's like, no, like, imagine if she had gone in, and maybe she did get really lucky and win a bunch of this money, and the ladies got mad at her, and that directly conflicted with her getting what she wanted, which was to find Sir George and send him a letter. But it doesn't. She just gets out of the situation scot-free with no consequences. This is the perfectionist issue that I'm talking about. It comes up in all these really small ways throughout the entirety of the story. Like with the prince. What if, I don't agree with him initially just instantly falling in love with her. Like, I actually don't mind that one as much because, like, there's a little bit of, like, she kind of plays hard to get, and I think that draws his interest because, like, everyone's falling all over themselves, so I can kind of get that one a little bit. But, like, imagine if the prince found her and Simon in the garden, and that created this whole huge situation for her and the Duke, and it could have been this really awesome, intricate situation. Maybe he doesn't rat her out, but he uses that to his advantage against Simon, or there's a conflict between the two of them that they have to resolve. It doesn't happen though. And now I'm going to get into one of my biggest problems with the show, which is, I think it's in episode 6 or 7. It's whenever Daphne and Simon start fighting, because she actually figures out how babies are made, which is like, okay, like I guess, like, if we're taking it in historical context, is she like 16? Maybe she doesn't know, right? But like, when she finds out, and instead of talking to him, like proving that he's doing it on purpose, and then talks to him and maybe starts to figure out why, that could have been really interesting and I think, in character, and it would have been interesting to play. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but on that conflict between the two of them. Instead, she figures out what he's doing, and instead of communicating at all, she goes and has sex with him and then doesn't let him pull out, which is kind of rape. And yeah. So it's like, don't get me wrong, Simon is not necessarily in the right because his trauma is dictating his life, which is wrong. But what she does in response to that is far worse. And I'm going to actually get into that now, which is, his trauma could have been interesting. It could have been an interesting play on how does this, and it was trying to semi do this, but it did not stick because the way that Daphne acted towards it. I think if Daphne would have been who she had seemed to be through most of the show, which was this like innocent, like perfect girl basically, and this trauma, like, because he warns her, right? He says, I can't have kids. And yeah, he's not totally forthcoming with her. He's not totally saying like, hey, I don't want to have kids. He's saying that I can't. So yeah, you can get into the wording there a little bit, but like, he's very upfront with her that he does not want kids. She still chooses to fall in love with him and marry him. And it would have been interesting to see this conflict between the two of them. And maybe she tries to help him, but it's him who has to help himself. He has to decide to move past his trauma and deal with this. And he doesn't realize the toll it takes on, like, this is a theoretical. He doesn't realize that the toll it's taking on her. She holds it in, and he ends up indirectly hurting her over and over and over until he realizes he fucked up. That could have been really interesting and would have been a really good play on like him trying to recover and move past this trauma. Instead, sorry, I'm reading through some of my notes quick. It it's just this really complex situation that just kind of sucks. But it's just kind of it's like she basically yells at him and tells him that he's wrong, and because the world, she's the protagonist, and the world agrees that she's perfect. Everyone blames Simon for his trauma, which is bad and toxic. That's not great. It's not great as an artist seeing that in a show. It actually makes it. It's honestly one of the things that made me the most angry about this show is basically reinforcing this idea of this toxic masculinity of you better shut up and bury your trauma and just deal with it. And it's not. That's what Simon's trying to get away from, right? But instead, everyone blames him instead of like, hey man, I know you've like your dad's terrible, but like maybe you need to go get help and talk about this, or maybe we need to figure out like, can we talk through this? Is there a way? And like he would probably pull back from that, but that would be an interesting conflict in the story. And there was a part in episode 8 that I was like, I forgot because I kind of watched part of the ending with my fiance, and then I got back, I got into it, or not into it, but she wanted me to watch the whole thing and review it, and I was like, yeah, it's popular, so I'll give it a shot, and I want to review some more TV shows, so, but in episode 8, they start actually communicating at one point, where she kind of like, she finds the letters about his father, stuff, blah, blah, blah. She starts to realize that, you know, he's got this buried trauma, and they actually almost have a conversation where he begins to realize, okay, maybe this isn't what I want for my life. Maybe I don't want to just get vengeance on my father. Maybe I want to have a happy life. And instead of letting that sit and actually like blossom into this conflict and tension and these thoughts and like building that relationship between the characters, they just have sex. They just have sex, and then she gets pregnant and has a kid, and everything's great. That's not how relationships work in real life, and that's not how they should work in in this fictional, like, you need to have a sense of some semi-realism in it. I know we're in a fictional historical world, but it's just a little disappointing as a writer to see these kind of things like and have them be that popular, right? And by all means, like, the show might get better. Like, I know it's based on a book series. I'm probably not going to read the book series, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I don't think I can. But I'll probably watch some of the show at least. I'll see. Though there might be a time where I have to like stop, especially if next season has moments that are just like a few in this season that I was like almost tempted to just shut it off. Okay. So I'm going to give another warning. There's one last thing I want to discuss, and I don't like to discuss political things on this channel because it's a book review channel, but it deals with the writing, and I think it's important to discuss. So if you can't handle those types of topics, if that can, if that's going to trigger you or anything, head out now. I won't be upset. Okay. So there is, and I don't have the exact quote, but there's one line in the show, I think it's in episode 3 or maybe 4, where Lady Danbury goes to Simon, if the king hadn't married one of us, then we'd have no place here. Or we wouldn't have a place in society. Referring to that they're black. I have there's two ways this situation could go. One, when you mention that line, that becomes a theme. You have to deal with the consequences of saying that in your story. And this is the only time it's mentioned, which made me upset. Because that could have been another point of good, interesting tension and conflict is, What are the consequences of the king making that decision for the entirety of society and everyone having to deal with it? And as much as, like, this is a big issue, and I'm definitely not the person to be like talking about it because I am a white straight male with privilege. But you need to if you mention this in your story, you need to address it. You need to talk about it and bring it up as a theme, especially when it's focused around one of your main characters. Now, you could have taken this the complete other way. With that, you basically said it in canon, in story, that there is a specific event that caused this, and that's how it is. If you had gone the other way, which is what I think this show probably should have done, because I don't think they have the room to talk about this kind of topic. They could have just not had that line at all. And the characters, like, I've seen complaints about, like, well, this isn't historically accurate. Fuck off, dude. It doesn't matter, okay? Like, you can cast a diverse cast of people in a historical time, and it doesn't matter. You're just casting a diverse cast because you want to give those actors work, which I think is great. Or it's just how the world is in this fictional world. This is fiction. It's not real. It does not need to be historically accurate. But with mentioning it, you bring up this. They brought up the issue, and I was like waiting, because like I had watched a few of the end episodes. I had watched in between too and stuff like that, so I caught some of the stuff, but not everything. And when I watched it myself, I caught that line and I wrote it down, and I was like, I wonder if they're gonna bring this up again. And they didn't at all. At all. It was never touched again. And it makes like, we have a responsibility as an artist to, deal with these issues in a way that is for the good of, everyone. And if you feel like, I don't think I could, if I had, let's say I directed it and wrote this show, right? I don't think I could, being with my perspective, go in and deal with that topic in that specific setting, because it's too close to reality. And I come from a place of privilege, so I don't really have a spot to speak on behalf of, people who have been marginalized. Man, it just, I hope that I kind of hope that they address it at some point. And it's one of my biggest complaints about this show, honestly. It's that and the Simon thing. Those are the two things that I'm just like, this is not okay. This is not okay as a work of art and as writing. So I know this one ran pretty long, guys. So if you're still here, I really appreciate you watching. As always, we're allowed to disagree. This one got a little bit more political and, I would say, tense than I usually like to do my reviews. But as always, if you disagree, if you have a different opinion, go down in the comments. Let's talk about it in a pleasant way. Let's not get aggressive with each other, please. And if you did like the video, make sure to hit a like and make sure to subscribe. And I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for watching.